Dr. Mary, as an expert in mind-body connection, can you explain in simple terms what this means?
Yes, well, in a way it's even funny to talk about the mind-body connection, because in many ways that reflects a language that comes from an assumption that the mind and the body are separate. And if we think about this very clearly, we can see that that's superstition, that the mind and the body do not operate as completely separate elements. We've never had them separate. We have developed the capacity to think our thoughts separate from reality, as if our thinking were in a vacuum, and we can go on and on in our minds creating fantasies that have nothing to do with the situation of the reality that we're in, based upon our desires or our fears, our history. And so in that way we have created a capacity for delusional living in many ways. But the great secret about this is that the mind and the body are not separate. And so anything that goes on in any facet of our being influences the whole. So this is particularly relevant as it concerns what indeed does go on in our minds. Because when we are thinking thoughts, our entire body responds to those thoughts as if they were real. I've shared this example in many of my talks. If we, for instance, imagine that we're parked in our car at a traffic light and we're late to a very important meeting and a train comes by, so we're delayed even farther, our entire body will respond to that event as if we were in danger. Now our minds have something going on in the way of a story. Something might happen if we're late to that meeting. Our boss might be angry, we might lose an important deal, and so on and so forth. So our minds have taken off in basically a fantasy, because it's the future. We don't really know what will or won't happen, but our minds have taken us there. If we backtrack and look at the physical reality of what's going on, we are seated in a car. That's all. There's no physical reason for our body to begin the process that kicks up. In response to our thinking, our body acts as if our thoughts are real. So our heart rate will increase, our hands will become tense and sweaty. We might feel agitated or even angry, more irritable. We might even find ourselves yelling at the train as if that would make a difference. And so we have all of these internal reactions that are physical and oftentimes play out in our behavior that relate only to our thinking. And so to have a notion that the mind and the body are separate has created a lot of delusional possibilities. We don't recognize, we have fallen asleep to how profound the internal milieu of our minds are in the making of our life. And so we're quite convinced that such and such is real, and so on and so forth. And so much of the predicament that we're in our physical reality stems from the delusions of our mind that we're completely unaware of. So when we talk about the mind-body connection, really we're giving voice to the best of our ability in the language that we have from this paradigm that denotes a separation of the mind and body, to this dawning recognition that in fact they are connected, they have never been separate. And so what goes on in our mind has a great deal to do with our experience in our life. both in terms of the experience that we're having subjectively, as well as the behavior that we tend to engage in, which has a very direct impact on our well-being, and even so far as the internal chemical milieu of our body, our physical structure, in response to the thinking patterns. And many of our thinking patterns are habituated, and what I mean by that is we have habits of the mind. We have particular neuronal tracks that we kind of conveniently fall into by default. So we might have a particularly angry personality, you might say. We might have a habit of feeling irritated by anything that doesn't go the way we want, and so then we take off on our stories, such and such and so and so, and blame and so on and so forth. And this creates an internal physical milieu that reflects that. So most of the illnesses that ail humanity right now, at least in the Western world where abundance is the norm, have to do with an excess of mental configurations that are not good for us, and then the way we behave out of that mental sort of milieu that we live